What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here. Repping America, the center, and common sense. And more often than not, California. Well, the weather's great here. I could say that. As far as the rest of it, well, I mean, it's got its ups and it's got its downs. But, a lot of days you see more downs than ups. That's just the way it is. Well, let's get this going. All right, so this is episode Q2. We're going to take Q to mean quizzes. Got a few quizzes here. Yeah, don't worry, they're going to be easy. So I'll start off with a real easy one. What Christmas song was written about the troops in World War II? Was it Fruitcake by the Superiors? Santa Claus in a Helicopter by Wing? Or I'll Be Home for Christmas by Bing Crosby? Well, hopefully you know it's C, I'll Be Home for Christmas. The other two songs are real, two of my favorite holiday songs coming to me from the Kevin and Bean show. That's where I was introduced to them. But yeah, I'll Be Home for Christmas. It's about soldier at World War II. Bing Crosby went over and performed that right around Christmas time. And a lot of the guys who heard him sing that song were later killed in the Battle of the Bulge. You know, our history is something worth remembering. It's worth remembering how people were able to rise to the occasion. We're going to cover a little more of that. Here's another easy one. So I listened to Armstrong and Getty 790 AM here in Los Angeles area, and they're raising money to put to help poor kids afford to join the Boy Scouts, scouting. You know, and I went through that as a kid, and I think it's a really important part of male maturity. You know, to learn about the outside world, to learn about being of assistance, and, you know, sort of being able to handle things on your own. I meet a lot of young guys nowadays that they don't seem to have the basic life skills. But anyhow, so Armstrong and Getty are raising money for this charity, and they have some interesting ways of going about it. Put it to a quiz here. A, shout-outs for clever donor names, like Jack's Wet Pants. Or B, Katie Green reading the Netflix Terms of Service. Or C, all of the above. Yeah, it's C. They did both of those. See, I told you this would be easy. That was hilarious. How quickly they raised $5,000 just by having Katie Green, the lovely news lady there, read the Netflix Terms of Service, changing her voice every so often. You know, that's one of the things about Christmas, the Christmas season that always touches my heart. The acts of kindness that people put out there. And, I commend them for raising money for scouting. Like I said, I think it's important. And it's one of those charities that doesn't, it doesn't get all the headlines. It's not sexy, as they like to say. But it's important because a lot of American youth, both boys and girls, are growing up in a world where their biggest teacher is the internet, social media. And I think we already know that that's not really all that good of an idea. But anyhow, so, I celebrate Christmas with a lower case C. In other words, I don't make it all a religious holiday. I watch my documentaries on Jesus and the Bible, things like that. I am a spiritual person. But to me, Christmas is not about a singular religion. And it really frustrated me back in the days when everybody changed Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays and holiday break and blah, 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 blah. And, you always heard the excuse was, they didn't want to offend people of other faiths. Okay, I don't know how many people are so into their faith that they would be offended by Merry Christmas. But I came up with why it was so easy to go from Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays. Was it A, because holidays is shorter? It's easier to say. Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas. It's a little bit shorter. Nobody likes to say the word Merry. Could it be that? Or is it C, they target the thick-skinned to appease the thin-skinned? Yeah, it's C. And that's what we're seeing here in America. We're seeing that on many different fronts where we're placating the thin-skinned people of the world. at the expense of the thick-skinned people, because they realize, like, yeah, sure, taking away Merry Christmas is insulting to Christians, but Christians don't complain about such things. Well, I guess that's kind of true. I myself don't complain about it because I'm a Christian, because I believe in Jesus. I complain about it because I think Christmas is for everyone. That's just the way I've always thought about it. All right, anyhow, we'll move on to something a little more deeper. Now I want to predicate this by saying that I have nothing but love for, the trans youth of America and the world. One of the reasons why I don't support a lot of these pro-Palestinian groups, these anti-Israeli groups, is because the groups they're supporting don't support the LGBT community. And I think that's wrong. But I'm bringing this story up because it's something of interest to me, how trends grow and what motivates the next step. They are finding right now that teen girls are claiming that they're trans, not as much as they were before, back down to previous levels. And next quiz here for you. Is it because it's just not happening? They're just not as many teen girls are trans? Or B, because they're scared of being trans? Or C, it's harder to prove allegiance? Yeah, it's C. See, it's like, I'm not saying that trans is a trend. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that falsely claiming that you're trans is a trend. And like with a lot of trends, at first you could just say it. And the next step is you could fly a flag, or you could wear a t-shirt, or you could print up a poster. But as these trends become harder and harder to conform to, I guess you could say, you have to up the ante. I mean, I remember a day where I got a lot of looks because I was a guy wearing one earring. And as that became a little more passé, I eventually increased it to both ears. I increased it to 5 earrings total, 3 in one ear, 2 in the other ear. And now we're at a point where you're putting a frickin' bolt in your ear. Giant bolt that leaves your earlobes dangling like, well, I don't want to say what it looks like, but it looks pretty gross. If you've ever seen anybody who has those big gauges, the big gauges taken out, it does look pretty disgusting. It's the same thing with tattoos. I used to have to, all my tattoos at one point were all covered up. I kept them covered because it said something about a person who gets a tattoo. Now everybody's got tattoos. Everybody's got sleeves, and it don't mean shit unless you start tattooing your face. And it's interesting how that's how we work as a society. I just find that fascinating that you can't claim to be punk rock unless you listen to this and you do this and you do that. And, I'm just here to say, F it, man. Appease yourself. Okay, that's the way I always look at it. If you looked at me, you wouldn't. If you saw me, you wouldn't think that I'm punk rock. You wouldn't think that I listen to a lot of the music that I listen to. I don't give a shit. Okay, it's just like bumper stickers. I don't need to tell the world who I am. I don't give a shit if the world believes me. I believe myself. One of the greatest things about being the age I am, mid to late 50s, is that I'm very comfortable in my own skin. I know who I am. I don't need affirmation from society. And that's one of the scariest things that I see with social media, is that people are getting their validation from strangers across the world, and they're listening to it. And when somebody doesn't believe them, they up the ante. And they're up in the ante until crazy places now. I'm sorry, but when you start getting facial tattoos and things like that, it's going to make your life hard. And if you're doing it simply so you could prove that you're such and such, well, you're off on a wrong track. Speaking of wrong tracks, I recently went down to Escondido. It's down by San Diego in Southern California. And California's a big place. We have a Southern. And almost immediately, we stopped to get lunch. I got out to have a cigarette and immediately met one of the local homeless people there. Nice guy, shook his hand. We talked for a little while I gave him a smoke, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And he asked me if I had meth. And I mentioned now, I've been sober for over 30 years. I showed him my tattoo. I have a tattoo that commemorates when I hit my 31st year of sobriety, my 30th year of marriage. I decided to pair those two dates just to make it easier on myself. And I said, yeah, about 30 years ago, I was given a choice between jail or rehab. And I chose rehab. What did he choose? A, he just walked off. B, he chose jail. Or C, he chose rehab. Well, he chose jail. And that's the problem with the disease of addiction. And I call it a disease because a lot of doctors call it a disease. Dr. Drew calls it a disease. So I'm going to go with that. How about that? But the disease is a cancer. It's a voice in your head that justifies your bad behavior, that pushes you back into that addiction, because the addiction monster doesn't give a crap if you're pooping your pants and sleeping on a bench. Doesn't care, as long as you're doing your drug of choice or drugs of choice. I mean, holy cow, this week I just read that there's now an even stronger version of fentanyl out there called catafentanyl or something like that. I didn't have a chance to get into it, but holy shit, man. These drugs grab a hold of people. They cause mental illness, and they exasperate mental illness. And we saw the deadly results of that recently when Rob Reiner and his wife were killed by their son. And that's hard on a recovering addict. It's that survivor's guilt. I don't personally suffer from that. I don't think. But it does kind of hit you when you realize that that's the same path you were on. And you got off. And why can't they get off? And why can't California, why can't the government as a whole get a little more serious about this mental illness thing? The fact remains is that we need conservatorships. Addiction and mental health is not a weekend stay at a cozy country club. It's at least a year, probably 2 years of intensive behavior modification. It is so hard to get and stay sober. I know I fell off the wagon 6 months after I got out of rehab. Fortunately, I didn't get myself back into the crosshairs of law enforcement, and I was only off the wagon for a short amount of time before I checked myself into a rehab clinic, and I've been clean ever since. But you need that time. And that's part of the problem that we're seeing here in California is these people are not getting the time that they need to actually battle their addiction and try to get back on track. And, a lot of people out there want to argue that, Rob Reiner, I grew up loving Rob Reiner. And then he turned into a wackadoodle lefty. He said some gross stuff about Rush Limbaugh. And other liberals have said gross stuff about Charlie Kirk, but that's no excuse. Okay, that's no excuse for what Trump said. All right, I need to put it on record. I'm disgusted by the way Trump acts sometimes. He has an opportunity to pull this country back to the middle, and instead he just keeps giving the media sound bites, keeps putting an ugly face on conservatism, and I don't really appreciate it. What happened to Rob Reiner was absolutely tragic. I don't care if you want to argue that it was of his own design and make. I don't care about all that. All right. Whenever a son or a daughter kills their parents, it is gross, and we should all condemn it, and we should all have sympathy for the family. This is not something to politicize. The only part of this that is even worth politicizing at all is the fact that the system has failed. When we know people are struggling and have problems and can't do it on their own, we need to have that assistance available. And in extreme cases, we need to have that assistance be forced upon the person. A person who is in the throes of mental illness or drug addiction is not going to be making good decisions. And they need to be a ward of the state or a war to their parents again, a conservatorship, some way of getting these people some sort of institutionalized long-term help. It's the only way. Look, the truth of the matter is, when it comes to things like homelessness and addiction and things like that, you're only going to save 30 to 40%. But if you don't try, you're going to save zero. Last weekend, they were doing a Hanukkah festival in a beach, Bondi Beach in Australia, and a father and son started gunning down people. One of them was stopped by Ahmed Al-Ahmed, who ran at the gunman and grabbed him, got the weapon away from him. He was shot several times in the struggle. And I want it just to be pointed out that while these two Muslims were killing Jews, a Muslim stepped in. We can't condemn people for the actions of their group. Period. Full stop. We just can't do it. It's a very dangerous and slippery slope. But not only did he step in and nearly give his life, two bystanders, Boris Gurman and his wife Sophia, he's 69, she's 61. They were a Russian Jewish couple, and they saw the killers getting out of their car. From the dash cam video, we could see the older gentleman struggling with the gunman. He disarms him for a while before he's shot and his wife is shot. And in the video, it does look like there's an ISIS flag on the car. I don't know if they've confirmed that or not. Right now, they are looking at Iran as a possible sponsor of this. There are reports that the gunman had traveled to, I believe, the Philippines, where they may have received some training. Islamic extremism is one of the greatest threats we face as a planet right now. They have passages in their books, just like the Bible, that can be used to justify this kind of violence. But again, this story is more about these three people who saw gunmen getting ready to gun down innocent people, and instead of running away, they ran at them. And that's what we need to do here in this country, especially when it comes to our politics. We need to stand up. We need to stand up for what we believe in. And more importantly, we need to stand up for what we know is right. Recently, 201 House Democrats voted against a bill that Republicans say would prevent dangerous migrants who come to the U.S. illegally as children from walking free. And this got all kinds of derision. It's really hilarious how the left wants to paint this as this, like, well, let's just quote Representative Luz Rivas, a Democrat from California. It, quote, undermines and strips critical rights from vulnerable children, and it subjects children as young as 12 to strip searches. Holy shit. Wow, that sounds bad. Well, as the guy Russell Fry, a Republican from South Carolina, points out, we already do medical evaluations of children when they come to this country. It already is in practice. All we're saying is if there's a tattoo on your shoulder or your forehead, that's a gang tattoo, hey, maybe we shouldn't let them on the streets. Huh. Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't just let them go with an unvetted foster family. Maybe we should put them in a secure facility until we have times to check. They're talking about, this bill was sponsored, the Kayla Hamilton Act was named after a 20-year-old autistic woman who was killed by a 16-year-old from El Salvador. And as Russell Fry says, I think in this one instance, a simple phone call to El Salvador would have kept him in a secure facility. An eyeball check on gang tattoos on his body would have kept him in a secure facility because he had both. He would never have been on our streets. He would have been held in a security facility pending his immigration hearing, which happens pretty quickly. They would rather kowtow to criminal illegal aliens than to stand up for American citizens. That's what the Democrats are saying. And we're going to get into a little bit of why. Because I think one of the later articles here touches on why they're so afraid to stand up for what's right. Look, if you're already performing, and keep in mind, keep in mind, right, here I go bouncing around with my bouncy little brain. But keep in mind that unaccompanied minors is not 8-year-olds, okay? It's 16-year-olds. It's 17-year-olds. This kid who killed that autistic girl, 16 years old. I'm sorry, but teenagers are prone to violent behavior and crimes. They just are. I'm not saying exclusively, and I'm not saying all of them. But there needs to be something done to check, because you could literally have 17-year-old gang members just walk across the border, get released to a fake foster family, and then go join their gang in whatever city they're in. It's ridiculous. And for the Democrats to simply vote against it is just crazy. Another crazy article here. Gas prices continue to slide below $3, hitting fresh 4-year low. The national average at the pump was $2.90, which is 12 cents down from last year. It's been driven by U.S. refineries completing maintenance and boosting output, along with crude oil prices falling. And in fact, Gas Buddy data, Gas Buddy is an app that you could use to find gas prices, low gas prices, that places in Texas, Colorado, and Oklahoma are actually under $2 a gallon. Well, not here in California. Here in California, we're skyrocketing. We have refineries closing. And it's all because of the one-party rule. So that's the thing that gets me, is that all of these liberals want to support this idea of just getting Democrats in across the board, owning it, and that's how you're going to survive as a Democrat politician. Not by doing good things. Newsom is a failure. Both in housing and in gas, he has used fees and regulations to drive the prices up, and now he complains about it. It's just ridiculous. I'm going to skip that article. Look at that. Behind the scenes here, a little editing going on. I have to get to this. I don't often agree with the far left. A lot of people out there I just don't like. And one of those people is Elizabeth Warren. But I have to agree with her on this when she says private equity guts everything. Yep. Like she said, a few wealthy investors buy the outfit, load it with debt, strip out the assets, and suck money out of it until it collapses. And that's what happened with Sears, Payless, Toys R Us. People lose jobs when private equity firms move in. Worse, private equity firms have moved into the medical community, where again, profits are put above patients. They have moved into the housing market. One of the reasons why it's so hard to get a house now is because these private equity firms buy up the houses and then turn them into rentals or flip them after, rebuilding them, making them more expensive. But this is what they do. They use this thing called a leverage buyout. The private equity firm uses a large amount of debt to buy another company using the acquired company's own assets as security against the loan. That's sort of what happens when you buy a house. You buy a house and the bank says, well, this loan's guaranteed because the house can cover the loan. But when you do it in business, it crushes business. And something needs to be done about it. We need to change the rules so that, it stops. Because as Elizabeth Warren rightfully says right here, right? Look, this isn't a business model. It's legalized looting. Yeah. Really quickly here. Back during the pandemic, a lot of people got shut down, so-called banned, for talking about the vaccine and its links to heart issues. Well, now they've done a study on it, and they found that myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart, occurs in about 1 in 140,000 people when they get the first dose, 1 in 32,000 after the second dose, and among males 30 years of age or younger, that rises to 1 in 16,000. Ooh, don't you wish the odds up for the lottery were 1 in 16,000? Maybe you would win. This isn't about attacking the vaccines. It's about attacking people who are raising legitimate concerns They were shut down, and then it all turns. It sounds like the Hunter Biden laptop story again, where they suppress the information, and then it turns out to all be true. Now, I don't know. If I had a son who was 30 years or younger, I don't know what I would do if I had to get him vaccinated, because 1 in 16,000, those are not great odds. But again, it just points out the reason why we need to have people out here who are just trying to bring forth the truth, just trying to bring forth both sides of the story, just trying to bring out the nuts and the bolts and the ABCs. I don't know. It's frustrating sometimes, where I have to watch what I say in a country with freedom of speech. I don't preach hate here. I preach love. I think you all know that. So if you haven't seen the video, there's a video out there where a young lady is berating an older lady because the older lady is wearing a Charlie Kirk Freedom t-shirt, and she keeps using the F word over and over again at her, talking about going above her head, talking about getting her fired. So my question to you is, after this video aired, did the internet A, flame the Target worker, B, flame the bratty worker, the bratty child, or C, make the Target worker rich? Now, the answer is B and C. They flamed the bratty child. I don't even think she's a child, but I'm going to call her that because that kind of behavior is kind of ignorant. But they did a GoFundMe, raised over $100,000 for this older lady who's working the seasonal shift at Target, trying to make ends meet. Sometimes the internet can be a good thing. You know, it's people who are willing to stand up for what's right. Now, I agree. I do agree with some people. I don't necessarily think that people, while they're working, should be wearing anything, period, full stop. A Trump hat, a MAGA hat, F the police, an F ICE shirt. None of that really needs to be in a business, okay? But she was allowed to wear the shirt, and she was accosted by this brat with a phone, and the internet said, well, we're going to choose who's right. So my next question involves two different stories. One, police in England avoided grooming gang investigations, and Minnesota is facing one of the largest social services fraud scandals in U.S. history. And how were these two crimes covered up? Or why were these crimes sort of covered up? Was it A, because immigrants are better at evading the police? B, no crimes were committed? C, the authorities were in on it? Or D, racism claims? Yeah. The answer is D, racism claims. While a majority of Minnesota government employees in certain departments, and I mean a majority, something like 400 out of 482, were letting Walsh and other government officials know that, hey, there is a bunch of suspicious shit going on, because the people committing the fraud had dark skin, nobody wanted to investigate. They were afraid of being called a racist. Same thing in England. These grooming gangs seemed to have a few common denominators, and police were afraid that they'd be labeled as racist if they investigated. The race card has been used as a weapon for long enough. Both sides of the fence need to get behind the idea that using the race card as a weapon is no defense. And in fact, I argue it's almost a crime, because you are belittling the people who have actually gone through racism. Just like when Joe Biden said Jim Crow laws, he shit all over the people who actually went through actual Jim Crow laws. And my God, think about how big the Minnesota thing is. Right now, Tim Walz is out there saying that, oh, it's being politicized. You look, I don't give a shit what the number is. Whether it's $500 million, $1 billion, or what they're saying now, maybe $9 billion was defrauded from the state of Minnesota by, through agencies designed to help people. Well, if that's Minnesota, what about California, New York, Washington? Let's just throw in Texas. All right, let's throw in Texas. This isn't a red or blue thing. What about the U.S.? How much fraud are we paying for right now? How many people are buying fancy cars and gold jewelry and taking European vacations? Holiday road. I'm sorry. How many people are taking advantage of the government right now? And how many times is the government turning a blind eye because they don't want to be accused of racism? I have a feeling that Minnesota is just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, I know it is. We see it in places like D.C., where they're being investigated right now because the police were sort of using categories to avoid making the national crime stats. They came up with new classifications for crime that don't get reported to make crime look like it's going down. And when somebody tries to investigate, they're politicizing it. Oh, this is being politicized. Oh, it's because of racism. How long are we going to allow people, criminals, to hide behind smoke screens? That's the problem we're facing all across America. Here in California, with the mental illness and the drugs that are on our streets. It's a smoke screen. Oh, we want them to get care, but on their own terms. We want to be compassionate. Smoke screens. Smoke screens. Bronco has a great cartoon right now of the Democrats ignoring the hundreds of the thousands of deaths from drugs, but crying over a few drug smugglers shot up on a boat. This is an ugly world, and we need to get ugly about it. The truth is the truth. That's just the way it is. I was talking to somebody earlier in the week. We were talking about Gaza, and they were talking about, well, I understand that Israel needs to defend itself, but they went too far. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you slap Israel, they blow up your family. That's their reaction. That's how they react. Okay, they overreact to things. That's just the way it is. Deal with it. They are trying to smuggle more and more dangerous drugs into the United States, and something has to be done. Venezuela is helping Russia and Iran avoid sanctions. Something has to be done about it. We have too many mentally ill and drug-addicted people on the streets. Something needs to be done about it. Prices for gas are way too high in California. The fifth largest economy. Well, then why is everything so expensive here if we have so much money? Corruption? I don't know. Is it that government corruption where they just pack on all these fees and then they shuffle the money around so it comes back to them in campaign donations? Yeah, probably. But we have to be able to identify and live by the truth. Whatever that might be. Whatever that might be. Well, thank you for your time. I love all of you, and I want the best for everybody. I'm Kid Copious on Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. And I know it sounds silly, but I really believe in it. When the stress starts to build up, crank the tunes and dance it out. Peace, y'all.